Hello, I am Walter Byron, Chairman of your Planning Board. I'd like to welcome you to a presentation on the changes that are proposed to the zoning bylaws for the town center, also known as the B1 district. You'll be seeing these at the May town meeting. This presentation is intended to provide you with an introduction and explanation of the zoning recommendations so that you can view the information ahead of follow-up meetings prior to our May town meeting to discuss and answer questions about the B1 zoning recommendations. These follow-up meetings will include a public hearing hosted by the Planning Board on April 13th at 7 p.m. For more than 20 years, the town has been encouraging development in town center with limited success. Many lots remain undeveloped, and the long-standing goal of completing a traditional pedestrian-oriented New England village with retail, commercial services, and mixed uses, including housing that provides for social and cultural interaction for all age groups, remains elusive. Recognizing that the zoning bylaws can set the dimensions and requirements of buildings and their uses, making the economics of construction more or less attractive to developers, more than 2 years ago, a B1 Zoning Committee composed of town board members and citizens began the task of revising the B1 zoning laws to inspire and encourage mixed-use development by property owners within the B1 district, consistent with the above goal for the town center. What you're about to see are the fruits of their labors captured in 17 zoning bylaw revisions for the B1 district in the following areas: new B1 inner and outer core map and boundaries, addition of design guidelines for buildings, changes to the affordable housing component, elimination of planned multi-lot development, expansion of allowed building height, increased residential density, requirements to tie into town water, revision to building setback requirements and minimum lot size, changes to auto and bicycle parking requirements, changes to allowed uses by right or by special permit, and lastly, revisions to prohibited uses. Please know that the Planning Board supports these revisions to the B1 zoning bylaws and looks forward to their adoption by the assembled Norfolk citizens at the May town meeting. Now let me pass the baton to Erin Hunt, a member of our Planning Board and of the B1 Zoning Committee.
Hello, everyone. As Rich just mentioned, my name is Erin Hunt. I'm a member of the Planning Board, the Design Review Board, and the B1 Zoning Committee. In the past, I was involved with the Southwood Planning Committee, and in the future, I will be involved with the Fire Station Building Committee. I'm a licensed and practicing architect with LEED certification. I'd like to start this evening with some personal reflection on the B1 study and move on to a summary of the B1 committee activities over the last 3 years. Personally, having first moved to the region over 40 years ago, I've had the distinct pleasure of being a Norfolk resident for the last 11 years. I have childhood memories of Norfolk, including riding my bike to Norfolk Center to pick up Jolly Ranchers at the convenience store, and later in life, getting pulled over in a car, not on my bike, by the Norfolk police on the way to the Franklin movie house. Since those times, much in our world has changed. In 1980, 40 years ago, the population of the greater Boston region crossed 3 million people. In 2000, 20 years ago, the population of the greater Boston region crossed 4 million people. In 2021, this year, the population of the greater Boston region is projected to cross 5 million people. The population of the greater Boston region is projected to grow at a 6 to 12% rate for the next 20 years. The Boston region has the third highest housing costs in the country, behind only Manhattan and San Francisco. Norfolk is within an hour commute of the cities of Boston, Providence, and Worcester. The recently approved economic development bill for the state includes over $115 million in capital grants and loans, in addition to housing tax credits, for the housing choice initiatives that promote affordable, multifamily housing and transit-oriented development within a half a mile of an MBTA station. Norfolk has an MBTA commuter rail station. MassDOT less recently approved a $20 billion 5-year investment plan for the MBTA system. Evidence of this investment is apparent with the track expansion currently ongoing in our town and on our Franklin line and neighboring towns. In the last 20 years, the population of Norfolk has grown roughly 10% or up to 1,000 people. As mentioned previously, the population of Norfolk is projected to grow by as much as 20% in the next 20 years. 20% growth equals the addition of up to 2,000 or maybe even 2,400 people to the town of Norfolk. There are currently 7 40B projects on the books in Norfolk in various stages of development. 4 of those 7 40B projects are in the fields, farms, and other open spaces outside of the B1 district in the town center, and far more than a half a mile from the train station. Growth requires responsible planning and investment. The zoning changes presented here this evening are the work of a team representing the town's interests, most of which are volunteers. We discussed the articles at great length and in great depth, and sometimes we agreed and sometimes argued passionately over just what responsible planning and investment is. Now I'll get into some of the more specific duties of the B1 committee. On the screen, you can see the current members of the committee, Erin Hunt, myself, the chair and planning board representative, Kevin Kalkut, the select board representative, Josephine Kordahi, the zoning board rep, Susan Klein, the advisory board rep, Gary Sullivan and Ed Haddad, both concerned residents. The B1 committee mission statement is here for you to read. I will summarize it more point of factly. Our goal was to plan for and promote a financially viable and diverse town center, to capitalize on and enhance the existing town center character, to plan for the forecasted population growth over a period of 10 to 40 years, to proactively deter unfriendly 40B projects, and most specifically, to update the B1 district town center zoning bylaw regulations. As previously mentioned, the B1 committee first met over 3 years ago and at the end of 2018. And there were a series of meetings leading up to a town meeting in October of 2019. In October of 2019, the committee made their recommendations to the planning board, and the planning board together went to the advisory board for a meeting to put articles to the town meeting at that point in time. The advisory board raised a number of questions, which the committee started to address over the meetings that have happened since then and are outlined in the next slide. So as you can see, we've been very busy over the course of the last 2 years, advising and updating the articles for discussion this evening. And we are headed towards presenting the articles. We have presented the articles to the planning board, and the planning board is heading towards presenting them to the rest of the committees for presentation to the town at the April town meeting. The next slide goes to show where we have posted the documentation that we have collected as a committee. It is on the town website and it is available there for you to review when you have the time to do so. There are also a number of meetings that have been recorded, which can be found through the town's website. Our next speaker is from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, or as will most likely be referenced from here on out, the MAPC. The town of Norfolk applied for and received a grant from the Mass Housing for planning support of the B1 zoning changes study. The mission of the MAPC is to promote smart growth and regional collaboration, and they help advance sound municipal management, sustainable land use, protection of natural resources, efficient and affordable transportation, a diverse housing stock, public safety, economic development, clean energy, healthy communities, an informed public, as well as equity and opportunity among people of all backgrounds. The MAPC is an independent third-party consultant that has offered its expertise and technical assistance to help the town to achieve the defined goals for the B1 zoning study. Assigned planning staff from the MAPC Land Use Department brings a strong background in design and development issues associated with mixed-use town centers, as well as both recent and historical experience with similar studies and projects throughout our region. The project has been led by Principal Planner Josh Fiala, who is a certified planner and licensed architect. Josh will take it from here.
Great, thank you, Erin. It's been a real pleasure working with the town of Norfolk and the Planning Board and the B1 Committee over the past 2 years to develop these zoning improvements for the town center. What you have in Norfolk is a quintessential New England town center. It is easy to understand why it is such an important place for residents of the town. That importance has been clearly articulated in previous studies and planning documents, including, most recently, the Townwide Economic Development Plan, Housing Production Plan, and the Townwide Master Plan. The town is now beginning the process of updating the Housing Production Plan and the Town Master Plan to keep these important guiding documents up to date. This B1 District Town Center zoning study is a continuation of efforts that have been decades in the making and builds on this strong foundation of town planning proactively for the future. In the Town Master Plan, the vision statement for the town center is provided. It's what's stated on the screen. It shows that Norfolk residents would like to see its town center developed into a traditional pedestrian-oriented New England village with retail, commercial, and mixed uses, including housing, that provide cultural and social interaction for all age groups. The town has been making progress on this vision over the years and continues to try to encourage and attract investment in the town center. Most recently, the town center saw a successful mixed-use development investment at 18 Union Street. This project is widely seen as success for the town center and has developed the development of the type and scale that is desired on other vacant lots on Main Street, Liberty Lane, and Meeting House Road. As part of this process, we explored the details of this success and interviewed this developer and other property owners. What we learned is that several unique and positive circumstances had to align to allow this type of development to occur, and that its success is unlikely to be easily replicated on other vacant properties around the town center. We know why this type of mixed-use development success is good for the town and desirable. It strengthens the town's commercial base, the commercial tax base, and diversifies the contributing uses. Town center is the right place to focus the growth of the town. It is walkable, compact, and transit-oriented, and can reduce the overdevelopment of other less suitable locations in town. In context of predominantly single-family homes, the type of housing that is part of mixed-use development is both desirable and diverse, providing housing choices for condos, rentals, or smaller units that allow opportunities for young professionals or retirees that are not as prevalent. Finally, more activity in town center is good for all businesses and economic activity there. Additional residents and commercial activity add more dollars to the district and provide multiple reasons to visit. This is important to a successful town center. In order to encourage more successful mixed-use development in town center and to make the next 18 Union Street more likely, a set of recommendations were developed. The recommendations are the result of detailed analyses of the current zoning, development potential, and feedback from the community to balance all considerations, while improving the likelihood that mixed-use development in town center can occur. Directly impacting the feasibility are current zoning regulations that limit the density and height of the buildings and require more parking than is necessary. Current zoning regulations also reduce the flexibility for development through building height and building footprint limitations. And current zoning regulations lack clarity and consistency with some language that is infrequently used or contradictory. The parcel analysis that was undertaken pointed to a number of parcels shown in green that are most likely to develop in the near term and parcels shown in yellow that are more likely to develop in the longer term. The town center has a large area that is unlikely to change no matter what the zoning regulations state, because they are properties that are recently developed or municipally owned. We determined the area outlined in black is the most important and impactful to encourage mixed-use development in the town center. It includes properties primarily along Main Street and Liberty Lane. You'll see this is where the zoning recommendations are focused. The feasibility analysis involved modeling development numbers based on zoning regulations for potential costs and revenues that were based on recently comparable projects. The results showed that adjusting the regulations identified does positively impact financial feasibility, but that feasibility is found under a narrow set of circumstances. The analysis showed that increasing the building height, increasing residential density, and decreasing the parking had the most positive impact on financial feasibility. Under the scenarios modeled, which are the rows in the summary table, the most feasible was the one in which a developer or property owner holds onto the property as a rental asset, showing that at least according to these numbers, it is less likely a developer will come to town, into the town center to build something and then sell it off. A total potential build-out was performed to better understand the impact of the zoning recommendations. The build-out was based on the assumption that sewer would be available to support development in the town center. The build-out shows changes that would positively impact the economic health of the town center, but it also is a relatively modest amount of total housing units. These figures are across all parcels impacted by the zoning changes and may require many years to be designed, approved, and built incrementally, property by property. So those are the total numbers. The process also included gathering your insights about what makes a good design for town center. And those insights have been directly integrated into the zoning recommendations and the design guidelines for the B1 district. This information and other insights were gathered through a community meeting, public hearing, and community survey that were hosted in 2019 as a foundation of this process. One high-level point of feedback that is good to keep in mind amongst all these details is that 79% of the 540 survey respondents reported that either they were neutral, dissatisfied, or extremely dissatisfied with town center today. This is at the heart of why these B1 zoning recommendations are so important. People see the potential in town center and want it to be better. And that is one way to enable progress toward that improvement. As part of this process, a set of zoning recommendations was packaged for the fall 2019 town meeting, as Erin mentioned. Ultimately, those recommendations were postponed. The resulting discussion provided additional feedback from you and the town community that the zoning recommendations did not provide enough protection to the town, particularly in the number of potential new residential units, height of the buildings, impacts of the development, and lack of parking. Additionally, feedback suggested zoning recommendations did not adequately address affordable housing or help the town to progress on its subsidized housing inventory. And finally, that zoning should be more focused on commercial uses. The current zoning recommendations, excuse me, have been refined through additional analysis and extensive discussion with the B1 committee members and planning board members over the past year and more. To add protections for the town, the boundary of the B1 core subdistrict, the area that is the target of the zoning changes, has been reduced to specifically target the properties identified on the previous slide as the best opportunities and to prevent unintended consequences on a larger area of land. The residential density increase is expressed as a maximum, presenting a maximum yield which can occur as was represented in the build-out slide. The building height has not been increased to 3.5 stories as previously proposed, but remains at 3 stories as is currently regulated. The district design guidelines provide additional guidance for the review and approval of the development to fit within the vision for town center. The overall parking requirements are no longer reduced in this set of zoning recommendations and remain the same, but the shared parking provision is proposed to become more effective and provide that flexibility on parking. Affordability requirements have been increased based on a stepped increment related to the scale of the development, which will help the town make better progress on their affordable housing. The requirements for ground floor commercial have not been reduced, retaining a focus on those uses in town center. On the screen is an illustration of how the regulations may direct investment in the town center. Of course, it's only an illustration and dependent on private development and investment, but we think it's a visual reflection of this work and the recommendations. It has been both a comprehensive and detailed process of analysis that has been responsive to the many inputs we have received from town committees, boards, residents, property owners, and developers. We believe the recommendations increase the likelihood that the town will see continued investment in the town center, and that the investments will result in moving the town center closer to the vision the community has expressed. Here's another view of the same illustration that shows investment and activity on parcels that today remain empty, all contributing more effectively to a traditional pedestrian-oriented New England village with retail, commercial services, and mixed uses, including housing that provides social and cultural interaction for all age groups, just as the vision statement suggested. Lastly, it's worth highlighting a very recent development at the state legislative level relative to zoning. Concurrently, as our work with this zoning has been occurring, these changes have occurred. The recently passed economic bond bill included a series of revisions to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 40A, the Zoning Act. It states that an MBTA community shall have at least one zoning district that is reasonably sized and complies with the following. Multifamily housing is permitted as of right. It has a minimum gross density of 15 units per acre. It is not more than 1/2 mile from a commuter rail station and has no age restrictions and is suitable for families with children. Eventually, the municipalities will need to comply with these changes to remain eligible for certain types of grants. Grants that the town of Norfolk has recently pursued and been awarded. The new regulations continue to be clarified, but in our current understanding of them, the B1 district as it's currently defined does not comply with these regulations. But with the proposed changes, the new district would be in compliance. Now I'd like to hand it off to Richard McCarthy, your town planner. He's going to walk us through the specific zoning changes for the B1 zoning district.
Have that space outside the home and with other businesses, or maybe other entrepreneurs to share it. So we're doing that. And again, those we have added a few more things to help with adding the commercial uses in the ground floor within the B1 zone. And I think that concludes my portion of the presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Gary Searle, one of our planning board members, so you can hear from him.
Thanks, Rich. Whoops. Thanks, Rich. I think I'm on. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Searle. I'm a planning board member for the past 2 years and a Norfolk resident for more than 25 years now. The B1 district is Norfolk's primary business district and also the center of our town. The design, the appearance, and the mixture of businesses and housing in the town center convey our identity to potential residents and business owners. Norfolk is fortunate to have a commuter rail that passes through the center of our town, a common area nearby that can be used for public gatherings and events, and a few historical buildings that both capture our New England heritage and entice those from outside our town to stop and take a second look. However, in the time that I have been a resident of Norfolk, there's been very little change to the center of the town, and lack of a focused growth towards an improved vision for the town center. 2 to 3 years ago, there were a number of public meetings to elicit feedback from citizens of the town to determine what the residents would like to see in the B1 district. Following those meetings, which were open to the entire town, a B1 committee was established that included town residents and members from various town boards. And that committee was supported by the MAPC to identify how to make the appropriate changes to the town's bylaws and to achieve the vision. The B1 committee met with owners of property in the B1 district and property developers to elicit feedback and to better understand the limitations and trade-offs that constrain property development and profitability. The dilemma facing many property owners is whether to build mixed-use buildings that conform to the town's current bylaws or to maximize their return on investment by building affordable housing using the state's 40B regulations. The committee also evaluated Norfolk's existing bylaws and bylaw changes made within similar sized towns in the Commonwealth. The general conclusion from the B1 committee investigation was that the town's existing bylaws are too restrictive, and the committee has since worked to draft amendments to the bylaws to close the gap between the existing bylaws and the state's 40B requirements, thereby making the proposed bylaws more attractive to property owners. Two things are certain. The town of Norfolk will continue to grow at a moderate rate, and if we make no changes to the existing bylaws, then we should expect development in the town center that doesn't align with our collective vision for the future. However, if we are able to implement the proposed changes to the bylaws in the B1 district, the result will be a vibrant downtown that incorporates an improved walkable streetscape with green space, a mixture of commercial businesses, restaurants and pubs with integrated housing, all combined to make Norfolk a notable destination. The next speaker is Ed Haddad, and he was actually a member of the B1 committee since its inception.
Thanks, Gary. Hi, my name is Ed Haddad. I'm a B1 residential volunteer member. My wife and I are relatively new members to the Norfolk community. We moved here just a few years ago. We moved here we believed it was a beautiful residential town with a great quality of life. Why I got involved with the B1 committee was I felt that their mission resonated with me to improve the downtown commercial area, to bring some more businesses into the downtown area that I felt was important for all of us residents to improve our quality of life living in a small town. My wife and I would like to go downtown, have a bite to eat, maybe have a drink at some nights if we're walk around downtown in the summer. My wife would like to shop in town. Unfortunately, right now we have to leave town every time we want to do those very simple tasks that a resident might expect to do in their own hometown. We do have grandchildren in town. I'd love to take them, walk around downtown, maybe have an ice cream cone somewhere, a soda, lunch somewhere, breakfast. That would be my goal, and that was my interest in working on the B1 committee. As a new resident to Norfolk, one of the first things that also became very apparent to me was we have high taxes. And that was another effect that I felt that the B1 committee, the mission of it could improve, might be that commercial and development could actually help our tax base, improve our tax base. What I learned is our taxes are high because we don't have a lot of business, a business base here in town as opposed to other towns. So this could contribute to improving our taxes and reducing the rate overall for all of us residents. And lastly, I'd just like to point out, I do live in River's Edge. We do have a commercial building there. We live together very harmoniously. We like having it there. We don't mind it, the residents, and the business owners. We drive by each other every day. There's no issue with living together. It's very natural to have businesses and residential working together and living together harmoniously. So that's my reasons for being on the committee and working towards the objectives that they have put forward and you've heard tonight. The next speaker is Chad Peck, who's a planning board member and is going to speak to you as well. Chad.
Thank you, Ed. Hello, everyone. I'm Chad Peck from the Norfolk Planning Board. I moved here almost 4 years ago. I live walking distance to the town center, where I walk my dogs almost daily. I see so much potential for our town center with a mixture of residential and commercial growth. I would love to see a walkable town center where I can grab a drink, dinner, or an ice cream cone. The proposed zoning changes to the B1 district are key to the successful growth of our town center. These proposed changes encapsulate the recommendations from the town survey, the B1 committee, the planning board, MAPC, and excellent feedback from the community. Without these changes, development of the town center will continue to be stagnated or even worse under the control of a hostile 40B developer. Growth is happening whether we plan for it or not. So let's plan for it. By making these zoning changes, we can stimulate growth and have control over the future of our town center. I'd now like to introduce Gary Sullivan from the B1 committee.
Thanks, Chad. Again, my name is Gary Sullivan. I'm a resident here in Norfolk and a citizen representative of the B1 Zoning Committee. Development and redevelopment in Norfolk, it's becoming more and more likely, almost inevitable, as Massachusetts stays economically strong and Norfolk grows accordingly. And it makes a lot of sense. We have a great town here. I moved here for that reason, and it's continued to be an appealing place to move to. The problem is that current zoning in Norfolk makes it so that potential developers routinely look at an alternate solution for zoning like 40B in order to increase the financial feasibility of their project. And we've seen this more than once in my 7 years of living here in town. Making these targeted zoning changes recommended by the B1 Zoning Committee is, in my opinion, a positive step forward and a necessary step forward for the continued development of our beautiful downtown area in a way that more closely resembles the collective vision that Norfolk residents have. What we don't want is all the untapped potential of our B1 district to be used up by residential only projects, especially 40B developments. Mixed use development with a focus on commercial while not losing sight of the importance of affordable housing is the way to go and exactly what Norfolk needs. On a personal note, I'd like to spend more of my dollars in our town. Restaurants, retail, boutique shops, whatever. Every time I drive to Medfield or Franklin or Foxborough, I think about how much I'd rather be driving to downtown Norfolk, in turn giving commercial tax dollars to my own town instead of somebody else's. These zoning changes do not guarantee that to happen, but it helps move things in the right direction and I feel is a positive for this town. And now I'd like to hand it over to our town administrator, Blythe Robinson.
Good evening, Gary. Thank you. My name is Blythe Robinson, and I've been your town administrator here in Norfolk for almost 2 years. A concern I've heard consistently since I arrived is about the high tax bills in Norfolk and the burden that places on our residents. And it's true, compared to our neighboring communities, as you've heard other speakers talk about, our residential tax bills are high. And what's the reason for that? Well, one of the reasons is that primarily the burden of all the services that we provide is on each of our residents in the community. You know, while we also continue to work hard on ways to reduce the cost of our services, one way that we can also reduce the cost of a tax bill is to diversify our tax base away from being primarily residential to a growing amount of commercial growth. The changes in the B1 district would provide that opportunity for that diversification by encouraging mixed uses, which is a combination of commercial development and housing. Given the proposed housing density that these changes would bring, it would not place an undue burden on the services that generally drive up budgets. And by those, I'm speaking primarily of the cost of education and public safety. Those are the two areas that increase costs the most. Because of the number of units that would probably be developed in any one of these buildings, as you saw at 18 Union Street, that overall increase would be low. As an example, speaking of 18 Union Street, that property is valued at just over $2.5 million, and the annual tax bill is just over $45,000. Developments like that start to make a significant difference in spreading the cost of all services around to every taxpayer in the town. Furthermore, developments like this will help, while they help diversify our tax base, I think it's also important that it maintains the character of our community, which I've heard since I got here is so important to our residents to maintain. Thank you, and I'd like to turn it over to Kevin Kalkut, the chairman of our Board of Selectmen.
Thank you, Blythe, and good evening, all. My name is Kevin Kalkut, and I have been serving in the capacity of your Select Board Chair for the last 2 years. For those 2 years, this dedicated group has been researching, debating, presenting, and preparing for this proposal. We've spoken to interested landowners, experienced developers, passionate residents, board and committee members, and professional municipal planners. We've collected, analyzed, argued, compared, and eventually agreed on data that points to this being the best alternative path forward versus the court. We've touched on just about every balance on the spectrum of community expectations, development feasibility, and the master plan's vision. Henry Ford once said that coming together is the beginning, keeping together is progress, and working together is success. We thank you for your participation and engagement with this proactive initiative for the future of our town. We look forward to your questions, insights, and most of all, working together to shape a town center that we can all be proud of.